Special shout out to all my patrons. Yep, are you here to debate?
Not really. I just wanted to ask you like a question. I'm not
Okay.
really too passionate about any of these topics.
Okay.
I just think that like gender and sex ed, I don't think that's necessary in like earlier grades. I think starting in like 6th grade that's fine, but I don't think it needs to be in K to 12.
I do. Specifically like teaching proper comprehensive sex health education leads to lower amounts of childhood SA.
So you think it should start in like kindergarten?
I mean, I think parents should be starting like the second the child can talk, but like in schools, yeah.
Like what do you mean like set like what aspect of sex education, like the
So
anatomical aspect?
we would be teaching them like their anatomical names of their body parts. I personally think we should be teaching them proper height. Well, because it leads to lower assault. So children who know the name of their body parts are less likely to be targeted by predators, as well as they're more easily able to say what happened to them if they are assaulted. So that's why we teach them those things. We should also be teaching them consent from like kindergarten. They should be understanding that their body is their body and no one gets to touch their body without their proper say so.
I get that. I just think it's a quite bit disingenuous to say that if a kid knows their penis is called a penis, that a child rapist is gonna stay away
these are
from them.
these are like certifiable studies that have been done. And you know who told us that they're less likely to assault the kids? The predators themselves. We've done thank you for the gifted subs. We've done conversations with predators and be like, yeah, I don't go after a kid if a kid can describe what I did to them because they don't want to get caught. This is from the mouth of the actual people that do it.
Yeah, I agree. Then I just think that that's just a difficult thing because I think that makes sense. But then you have, like what else are you gonna teach kids about in those earlier grades besides the names of their body parts? You know what I mean?
Well, like I said, we would teach them like proper consent. So like, oh my gosh, I didn't turn that off. I'll have to turn that off in a second. Twitch, proper consent. We would teach them family and friend circles, like the structures of families and things like that. That's what we would start teaching them in kindergarten. It would all be age appropriate.
Yeah, I just know a lot of like me and like other people have problems with just teaching kids about like or like I don't know, depicting sex stuff or teaching them about things that are too complicated for them.
Well, wait. No topic is too complicated if you dumb it down, right? Like think of algebra. A kindergartner's not going to understand algebra, but we can teach them 1 + 1 = 2. So we can teach them the building blocks so that they'll understand this stuff later.
Yeah, I agree. I just don't think it's necessary to tell kids about how there's like 63 different genders and all that stuff.
Well, wait. So when we talk about comprehensive gender education, it's so that kids don't get confused. Right. So a big issue right now is that kids aren't taught proper gender education. So you have a lot of kids who get all of their knowledge on gender from like what they see on TikTok. So you have kids who may not be on the gender spectrum, right? But be thinking they are because they've watched a TikTok and were confused, as opposed to talking to like a clinical psychologist or social worker or clinician who can interchange with a teacher who can say, hey, these are the things that you would be feeling and these are the things that would go on if you were experiencing this is this, so that they have a better understanding. If we don't teach kids things, it just leads to confusion.
So your main point is like they're going to see it on the internet anyway, so why not teach them in like a formal manner?
Well, yeah, why not teach them so that they're not going to be confused, right? Like
Yeah, I get that. I would argue that that's a pretty, like, just for the sake of debate, that's a pretty irrelevant point if parents are doing their job and making sure their kids aren't like seeing a bunch of toxic stuff on the internet. Like I know my kid and when he's in
Go ahead.
If I had a child in elementary school in this time period, I definitely would not let them on social media.
But wait, what if the parents are bad?
Yeah, that's why
I don't like this. Well, yeah, but I don't like this idea of like, we'll leave it up to the parents. A parent is not going to know as much as like a clinical psychologist, right? They just aren't.
Yeah, but you can't say that about somebody else's child, though.
Yes, we can. We do it all the time. We don't leave it up to the parents to teach algebra, and even the ones that do, they have to follow specifically state curated curriculum, or the kid doesn't graduate.
No,
like we recognize that parents aren't. Go ahead.
Nobody has a problem with teaching kids math.
Well, they did.
Like that. That's a pretty loose analogy.
Well, no, they did have a problem with that. It used to be women could not learn anything. They thought it was like the devil if women started learning stuff. Right? We've done this all the time.
I get that there are previous problems in the past that are a lot less justifiable than saying we need to be showing kids what consent is at the age of 7 years old.
But all I'm saying is like these topics that everyone's like, well, they shouldn't be learning that. We've had this conversation with almost every subject taught in school. We didn't think kids should learn social studies. They didn't think kids should have gym classes. They didn't think arts should be in the school. Like we always have this conversation. So like, I don't know.
That's pretty funny.
So I don't know why we're still like having the conversation every time a new subject gets brought up. The numbers speak for themselves. Children that have proper sex health education are less likely to get assaulted. Children who have proper sex health education are less likely to be pregnant in their teenage years. Children that have proper sex health education are more likely to understand consent and boundaries. Like these are all these things, we have evidence that they work. So why wouldn't we want them implemented across the board?
Yeah, that makes sense. I would definitely want kids taught stuff like that, but I just think it leads to getting into more complicated topics like teachers telling them about, like the 63 different genders and how you could be a girl if you want to. Like that's a big problem today because kids are very impressionable.
It should lead to those things. Right? I'm not saying that's what we teach them. Hold on. I'm not saying that's what we teach them in kindergarten, right? Those conversations I'd probably say for middle school, but children as young as 4 years old start developing their gender identity. So they're already developing this stuff, whether we want them to or not. It's happening. That's the truth. That's when you start developing gender. You start recognizing gender and other things at 2. You can usually discern boys from girls by right before your 3rd birthday, and by 4 years old is when you start to be able to recognize your own gender identity.
You can discern boys from girls because you understand that they look different from you, and your parents teach you they're boys and girls. That's not because you develop I guess in a technical sense, it's your
that is what learning gender is.
Identity.
That's what learning what gender. That's what learning what gender is.
I just mean. Telling people about how they could switch their gender, and if they feel more feminine on one day, then they're a girl, and if they feel more masculine one day, then they're a guy. I just don't think it's necessary to tell impressionable young humans who believe in the concept of Santa Claus things like that.
Wait, so
teachers don't do that? Kids, yeah, I know. Well, that's what
do you realize? Do you realize how smart kids are? Like they're brilliant.
They're not that smart.
Can you learn a second language right now? How long would it take you? Kids can learn a second language in months.
Considering I take class every day and I work, probably not.
Yeah, kids can learn second languages that, right? Their brains are
Spanish.
Well, hold on. Their brains are developing.
That is actually not true. I don't know what you're saying. That is just a lie. If I tried to teach my 11-year-old cousin today a second language, he would be fucking lost.
No, it's not. It is so much easier to learn a second language when you're young than when you're old because your brain is still learning.
That is such a. That's not. What are you basing this? Now I'm just confused because we were talking about gender stuff and it was all cool, and now you're telling me that kids can learn a second language.
Studies show that the best time to learn a new language is between birth and age 7 in what is referred to as the window of opportunity. While we can all learn a new language, research shows it is easier for young children to learn a second language.
What kids do you know walking around? What kids do you know walking around being bilingual?
Almost every kid that comes over here from Mexico. They're all speak. They're all. Have you ever noticed that when Mexican families come over and like,
they live in a bilingual. That is a completely different. That is a bilingual household.
No, not the same. Oftentimes it's not. You've never seen these households where the child has to speak for the parents like anytime they go out because the parents don't know English.
That is what. Hold on, you're not letting me finish. That is a bilingual household.
No, it's not.
Getting a language taught to you from your parents and then getting taught a different one as your primary language in school
is not a bilingual household
than a regular kid That is a lot different. You just said the parents don't know how to speak English. Yes, correct.
So that would mean it's not a bilingual household.
No, for the kids, they no, you're right. I phrased that wrong. I'm sorry. It is it's a kid living in a bilingual world. He has a family who speaks one language, and his society.
Where do you think the kid learns English? He takes ES. Do you not know what ESL is?
No, I know exactly what you're saying. I'm trying to explain to you how that isn't the same thing as just a normal kid who lives in an English household learning another language.
What are you talking about?
It's not like he's just. He's not. It's not. He's learning. He's learning 2 languages since birth. That is a lot.
No, they're not. Oftentimes, they're not learning it since birth. They're brought over here as kids, and then they take ESL. That's why we specifically have ESL as a class.
No, bro. What the fuck?
What is? Do you know what ESL is? Do you know what ESL is?
Yes, these kids.
What is it?
These kids are learning the English as a second language.
Great. So they're learning English in school. They already have a language solidified in their head. They go to school and they learn ESL. They learn a second language.
Yes, but they are surrounded by it 24/7.
Arguably, they learn the hardest language one of the hardest languages to learn.
He's thinking about sex with kids.
All I'm trying to say is how that's different from just some random white kid just learning Spanish on Duolingo. It's not the same thing as somebody switching countries and living around a different language 24/7. That is not the same thing as going on Duolingo and teaching yourself a language. I don't know what this
disagree. All the studies show that it is easier for children between birth and 7 to learn multiple languages than it is to learn a new language when you are an adult, because of brain elasticity, and your brain is not as easy to open. So kids,
I don't even know why I'm arguing this point, because it doesn't even. I don't know how that justifies how
because kids are smart,
impressionable. No, they're extremely impressionable. It doesn't matter. Okay, some kids are okay. Cool. Kids' brains are more adapt to learning a new language. It doesn't mean they're smarter.
Could a teacher have convinced you that you were trans?
That's irrelevant.
No, it's not.
My personal experience.
You said kids are impressionable. Could a teacher have convinced you that you were trans?
If I was more feminine, probably. My aunt would have been convinced she was trans. She played hockey her entire life.
So the answer is no, they couldn't have.
Yeah, the teachers probably could have. Well, that's just irrelevant, though. It's a strong.
It's not. You're saying kids are impressionable, but you're admitting that you yourself knew you were a boy and nobody was going to convince you otherwise.
Well, but I was impressionable. I wasn't trans. If I was more feminine and a teacher when I was a child told me that I was a different gender, I don't know what I would have thought. It's not relevant to me. Just because I didn't live through it doesn't mean that I can't
no teacher is telling kids they're another gender. That's not happening.
No, I mean telling kids the possibility that they could be another gender, which is something that people don't think about unless they're poisoned by it. You know what I mean?
Do trans people exist?
No, nobody. Yeah, but not.
So if you have a kid and the kid walks around outside and sees somebody who might be trans, and they have questions, should the parents just say, "Don't worry about it. We're not talking about it"? Or should the parents tell them?
These are such weird, vague questions.
It's not a vague question. You're saying that kids shouldn't be. If kids are taught.
If my kid walks outside and sees someone who he thinks might be trans, like what does that even mean? Like what does that mean?
What do you mean? What does it mean?
If my kid like just walking on the first of all, how old is my kid? What gender is my kid? What are you talking about? You just asked these ridiculously vague questions.
It's not vague. It's not vague at all. You just don't want to answer.
That's not vague.
No, you just don't want to answer the question.
Okay.
If you have a kid, I don't care the age, as soon as they can talk, you have a kid that sees someone who's trans and they have questions about it for you, what are you going to say to them?
My kid wouldn't know that they're trans because if they
I'm not saying that they know they're trans. I'm saying they have questions about this person. Maybe they have questions about the way they look. Maybe they have questions because they just don't look like what they've normally seen walking around. They're not looking atypical, right? What is your answer going to be?
Just learned how to talk and saw someone and has questions. I highly doubt my child who just learned how to talk is asking why someone is transgender.
Do you listen? You don't listen. You hear the first 2 words I say and then you shut your brain off.
You said when your child just learns how to walk. What if they saw a trans person and
I
had
said
questions?
they're not going to ask you specifically, are they trans? But what if they have questions about how that person looks because they don't look atypical to the people they usually see? What if they have questions about the way they're dressed? What are your responses to these questions going to be?
It depends how old they are. That's why I said it's a very vague question.
It's not a vague question. You just don't want to answer.
Well, how old is the
They're
kid?
5 years old.
They're 5?
Yep.
I don't know. I would just be like what's the question? See, this is why I say it's so vague.
I gave you multiple questions.
Why?
I literally gave you multiple questions.
So how would I respond to my kid saying, "Why do they look like that?"
Yeah. What if they go, "Mommy"? What if they go, "Daddy, Daddy"? That person looks like a boy but is dressed like a girl. What is your response to that going to be?
No 5-year-old would ever even think of saying that.
I'm down. I'm out. You're so disingenuous. I'm not having this conversation anymore. You're so fucking disingenuous, bro. What are you talking about? They ask questions like that all the fucking time. Have you ever talked to a 5-year-old before?